Hello and welcome back to the Rope Access and Climbing Podcast. I'm your host, Mikey Stevenson, and today we are talking about communication. If this is your first time here, please make sure to subscribe and follow us wherever you get your podcast. So stay tuned. Step into your harness and get ready for a podcast about the vertical world. All right, well, thank you very much for tuning into today's episode. Like I said, we are talking about communication. All right, this comes in many different forms, and depending on the industry that you are currently working in, this could differ. Now, whatever that industry is, it doesn't really matter what you choose, providing everyone on the crew is on the same page and understands how to communicate in that environment. Now, at the same time, if the first kind of resource of communication has a breakdown, you're going to have to rely on something else. Now, hopefully that is equally good and people understand that as well. At the end of the day, if it's not working, you need to get down, you need to reconvene and figure out what the reason for the breakdown is. Now, keep in mind that if you're using any sort of technology is great when it works, but what about if the battery dies? Heaven forbid you forgot to charge the battery the night before. And heck, that happens. It sucks, but it happens. Okay? Now, you're in the field, you're working in an environment where it's dark and noisy. So, an example would be in a confined space job, and they're doing a lot of impact work. Well, in that case, there's really virtually going to be no communication verbally in that space. You won't be able to communicate through radios. So you're going to have to rely on, some sort of hand signals. Now, if you have an amazing crew and you can do sign language, kudos to you. But I know myself, I can't rely on sign language. If you're in a confined space, you probably have a full face respirator on, so good luck reading lips. And the eyebrow blink thing, it's probably not going to be your best option either. So, maybe those are the times where you got to kind of step back from the job and kind of look at the surroundings and look at, alternative options. Now, the other thing that would hinder radio communication would be foreign accents. Now, nothing against accents, but if the crew is not familiar with that accent over a radio, it can be challenging to communicate through a radio. Or if, English or whatever language is not your first language, and there's, a loss of translation there, that definitely causes complications as well. So keep these things in mind when you're working out in the field. Obviously, you have to have a plan A, plan B, and maybe even a plan C when it comes to communication. But communication is one of those things that leads to a downward spiral of a lot of other things. Okay, so any kind of incident may lead to be a root cause as a lack of communication. Okay, I'm not saying a lack of planning communication. I'm talking communication via, just we can't communicate in this environment. Okay. When we're working on ropes or we're working in height, you have to have some sort of communication, and things change second to second, minute to minute, and having that ability to stop the job and look around and communicate is extremely important. We rely on it a lot more than we think we do until it's gone. And that's when you really got to step back and reconsider what's going on around you and look at alternative options to make your situation better. Myself, I have worked a lot and spent a lot of time in confined spaces. As a Boilermaker, I've spent many, many, many days in a confined space, gouging, welding, using impacts, using, jackhammer kind of equipment, hammer drills and stuff like that inside confined spaces. So it just echoes. It's super loud. You basically have no radio communication, and you're trying to play charades with the person next to you, and it can be extremely frustrating. I get it. And I'm only using confined spaces as an example, as this obviously amplifies the situation. But you don't have to be in a confined space to lose the ability to communicate through radios. But playing this game of charades can get frustrating for all parties involved. And this is when you really notice and understand the importance of having that freedom of communication between one another in these environments. Obviously, being inside a confined space, you're probably wearing a full face respirator. So what can you do? There's multiple things. First and foremost, depending on the background noise, if it's not too noisy, what I tell the individuals that are new to wearing full face respirators in these environments is talk slow and talk precise. Leave communication to a minimum. Think about what you're going to say over the radio prior to actually talking. When you're talking into a microphone from a full face respirator or a respirator at all, is put the microphone right essentially into the export diaphragm of the respirator, as that's where the sound will be exiting the face piece. It seems a little weird, but it does definitely help. I've been in these environments where you have to communicate with, project managers or execution leads and stuff like that. And these are things that I've found over the years working in these environments to just kind of try to help you out here. Okay. Another great tool is, if you have the ability, is finding throat mics that actually go around your neck and go to your voice box there. Now, those are really finicky. Not the throat mic isn't finicky, but finding the right connector for the radio that you purchased. So every model will have a different connection, and you're going to have to purchase the throat mic for that model of radio. There's a lot of third-party, manufacturers of throat mics. You're just going to have to find one that's compatible with your specific radio model. So, if that's a Kenwood, a Motorola, ICOM, whatever, UHF, VHF radio, those are things that you're going to have to research on your own to figure out which one's best for you. But those are that's definitely my go-to kind of favorite option if you're working in a full face in a confined space, is get a throat mic, get an earpiece, and then you have good communication in really crappy environments. And I wish that more people would, buy into this side of things, but so that's all I really got to say. It's not really a big conversation. It's pretty short, but let me know in the comments below what industry, what you're doing, and what your backup plan is in the event that, your primary means of communication fails you. All right. So thank you again. If you haven't already, please make sure to hit that like button if you're watching this on YouTube. Give us a review here on whatever podcast platform you are listening to this here. Subscribe if you haven't already on YouTube. Hit the bell for notifications as I put out new content every single Sunday. It's coming up to my 1 year on YouTube, so that's awesome. Thank you very much. And follow us wherever you get your podcasts, as it really does help me create more content like this. So, yeah, that's it. Have yourselves a great one. Until next time.